It was a moment in time. It was 16 years ago, Christmas. The whole family went to Michigan for Christmas that year. It was kind of neat because, you see, we arrived at the cottage to find all the kids there, the lights on, the house warm, the water on, the hot water tank lit, food cooking, and everyone, including that dog that was in the family at the time, enjoying a nice family time. I especially liked it because I'm usually the one who gets there and has to open up, but it was nice to get there and everything was done. We laughed and we joked, we watched TV, we opened presents, we ate together. We had fun with the 3 grandkids that we had at the time. It was just good to lay down at night and know that the family was together and all was well with the world. It was a moment in time. All fears were laid aside. No animosity was felt. Everyone pitched in. It was great. The week ended. Lee returned to Indianapolis, Kate and her family to the Chicago western suburbs, and Kurt and Jen and us back to Kankakee. We will probably never be together again like that for that long of a time. But it was an instant of family perfection with no worries for a few days. I was reminded of this verse then, and I'm reminded of it now. 1 John 4:18, perfect love casts out fear. It tells me that when we're together as a family, we don't have to fear. It tells me that when we're together as a Christian family, with God involved and all the Christian folks together, we shall not live in fear, because perfect love casts out fear. President Bush in 2001 stated a suggestion to the American public that we can live without fear only if we exert our power and eliminate the threat of our enemies. But we need to confront the logic of fear. Perfect love gets rid of fear. Fear has nothing to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not reached perfection in love. Now, let me say that fear is inevitable. We fear a holy God. It is out of reverence for what we can do if we do what he can do if we do not follow him that we fear him. In a real sense, a child may obey a parent out of fear of what may happen if they don't obey. A dog obeys his master partly out of fear of what that master may do if he doesn't respond the way he's supposed to, or that female dog. Fear also suggests other things. I was thinking about alarms. Once in a while, the church alarm will go off, and we'll get a phone call that the alarm has gone off. It means that there's a problem out here somewhere. Somebody has broken in, or somebody at least tried to. Or sometimes maybe the wind has blown real hard and knocked a door, or vibrated in the wind, and it made the alarm go off. And so those alarms happen. Brooke asked me this morning about a thing that's sitting on my desk. It's a temperature alarm. It's supposed to be in the attic in the winter and one in the furnace room. And if the temperature goes below a certain point, below 34 degrees in those areas, an alarm goes off on my phone and lets me know that there's no heat at the church and there could be pipes freezing and to do something about it. They make alarms that you can put in a basement that tell you if the water's starting to rise. And as I was thinking about that, I'm thinking about, thank goodness the alarms haven't gone off for a while, knock on wood. Alarm can be a disquiet, kicking us to action, that feeling of anxiety, that something's just not quite right. I've often heard through my voice or through my ears that I just have a suspicion that something's rotten in Denmark. And I looked that up to see where that phrase came from. It came out of Hamlet, Act 1, Scene 4. And having just seen Hamlet's father, what's my note say here? Having just seen Hamlet's father's ghost. That's what I wrote down. Hamlet's father was the king. And somebody saw his ghost And they said, ooh, something's rotten in Denmark. That ghost shouldn't be there. You see, it gives us an uneasiness that all is not well and that something needs to be done. We've had a little bit of uneasiness around here this week. Not quite sure what's going on. On Tuesday, I think it was, Jesse walked in the building in the late evening and called me and he said, sanctuary lights are on. Well, that's interesting. The sanctuary lights were turned off when we left here Sunday, but they were on. I got out here on Wednesday and walked in the sanctuary, and Kurt, there was a sanctuary light on again, and the sound system was on. Nobody had been in here, except maybe a church ghost. Last night, I just happened to check the security cameras around church to see if the lot had been plowed and just make sure everything was fine, and I noticed a light on back in one of the classrooms. Well, we had been out here earlier in the day and locked everything up, turned everything off, but how did that light get on? Came in this morning, there was a strange smell in the building, and who's been in here? What's going on? Well, we finally figured out the strange smell, but those kind of things just give an easiness that all is not well and something needs to be done. Well, I found the problem this morning. It was a plug vent on one of the furnaces, and I cleared the snow away, and the weird smell cleared out of the building. But without that, a little alarm going off of a smell, you wouldn't know to check things. In a world where we have to struggle for existence, fear is going to happen. And when we see all the things that can happen in life, we realize that sometimes we just have to take some defense. Wherever there's evil, there's fear of the seed of fear. I'm thinking about all the security systems. You know, we have locks on the doors. We have alarm in the building. We have security cameras in the building. We have an alarm system at home. We have security cameras. Some of our folks have security cameras around their house. We are all having to get new driver's licenses so we can fly somewhere if we actually want to fly somewhere without having to have a passport. And we think about protection, and everywhere we go is being aware of your surroundings. It's almost as though we're living in constant fear, and it's that fear of what may happen that brings those things about. Fear can come from ignorance. That might be a good word to say, but I fear electricity until I understand how it works and how to take two wires apart and put them back together again. I may fear a snowblower until I understand how it works, or a power saw until I understand a safe way to do it. A qualified electrician would not necessarily have fear of injury because they would know what to do to keep from that electricity shocking them. Although when we put the new sanctuary lights in, I did see our electrician get lit up for a second one day. Fear comes from our wrongdoing. If I'm going down the road and driving 90 miles an hour in a 70-mile-an-hour speed limit and I see a policeman behind me, I'm going to be fearing. And the other thing is, while I'm driving that high speed, I'm going to constantly be afraid that I'm going to see a policeman and not be able to slow down in time to keep from getting in trouble. Fear can educate us. We accidentally touch a hot burner on a stove and we learn to fear that fire and not do it again. We misbehave as a child and we get in trouble and we learn not to do that again, to be fearful of doing that thing again. And so when I think about all these fears and I look at this verse that says, perfect love casts out fear, I think, wait a minute, I should be able to live my life with no fear in anything at all. But you see, that's a great misunderstanding, that I will never be afraid of anything again. When I was a teenager, we lived in a home that had a garage detached from the house. Between the garage and the house, there was about 10 feet. And at night, that was a very extremely dark place. Just no light at all between the back of the house and that garage. And I can remember coming in late at night from things at church on Friday nights or Saturday nights from teen events, or maybe even late evening from something at school, and pulling the car in the garage and closing that garage door and feeling fearful as I walked through that open 10 feet, getting to the house to get in where it was safe once again. And my fear came because one time as I walked by there, a raccoon jumped out at me. Now, we lived just about 2 blocks from a park that was 16 miles long and was known for its wildlife, Edward Hines Drive. It was an amazing place. But once in a while, those animals would come up from that park, and one time one raccoon got in our garage and about tore the garage door apart, just that type of a thing. And so I feared walking between that spot at night, because maybe an animal was going to jump out at me. Maybe somebody would be hiding there and get me. And because I was afraid of that, and because I had read this verse that perfect love casts out fear, I thought, I must not have the Christian goods because I get fearful when I walk by that open spot at night. I sat down and talked to our youth pastor at church one night about it, and he looked at me and grinned, and he went, I know what you're talking about, but that's a natural fear that serves to protect you. Well, Dad eventually put a light on the back of the house that would come on if there was any reason for it to come on there, and it made walking by that area a lot better at night, because come to find out, my dad had an animal jump out at him, and he was a little bit fearful of walking by there at night as well. But it had nothing to do with our spiritual lives. For you see, the fear that I am free from is the fear that God will get me and that Satan will destroy me. The fear of an animal jumping at me is a natural fear. The fear of falling off a roof is a natural fear. The fear of touching something hot and getting burned is a natural fear. And so we need to reprogram our minds that natural fears are there to protect us. But the perfect love of God is there to protect our spiritual lives and keep us going every day for God. We need to reprogram our minds to realize that God is there to protect us, and that when we abide in Him, He abides in us, and that Satan may try to put fear in us through making strongholds of incorrect thinking. That's all I had back then was incorrect thinking, and it became a stronghold to where I didn't want to pull the garage door down at night and run to the house. I'm being laughed at back here because I think somebody else maybe understands what I'm saying, and they're shaking their head yes. I think of so many things that can make us fearful. Depression and that feeling of hopelessness. The feeling that it just doesn't matter anymore. That feeling that no one likes me. Why bother? You see, all those things that get into our minds, and we can wake up in the middle of the night and our mind's just racing about all kinds of things, and we begin to get fearful about life. But we need to remember that when we're God's people, perfect love means that God is in us. Listen to the scripture again. Verse 16. God is love. Well, it's Valentine's Day. We're thinking about love. We're thinking about the reasons we love people. We've gotten some Valentine's cards from people just thanking us for being a loving pastor to them. And I you know who you are. I appreciated getting those cards. I got a phone call the other night from a friend of mine who just called and said, just wanted you to know I appreciated such and such, and just wanted to share that with you on this Valentine's weekend. Those kind of things mean a lot to us when we get those. But that love that people talk about is only possible because God is love. And because God is love, the Bible says whoever lives in love lives in God and God in him. Perfect love means that God is in us. We find our life in Him. No other way to put it. Then I like this verse 17. In this way, We live in God. He lives in us. Love is in us. In this way, love is made complete among us. That's not the end of that verse. If you're following along with me, it says, so that we will have confidence on the day of judgment, because in this world we are like Him. There's no fear in love. And so what that's saying to me is that when that final judgment day comes, where we're all risen up to glorious heaven with Jesus, and that final judgment comes, when my personal final judgment comes and I leave this world, it tells me that I can go to God in confidence and just know that I'm going to go live with Him forever. No question asked, because God is love. I'm in Him. He's in me. His love is in me, and my love goes out to other people. Confidence that on the day of judgment, because I am like Him, I'm going to go live with Him. Because He loves us, and because we love Him, there's no fear. We have the confidence that He will carry us through to the end. Have you ever built a fence? We talk about fences. The big fence along the southern border. They've put a bunch of fences up in Washington, D.C. I find that interesting. Several of our neighbors have fences. Our new next door neighbors to the north of us have been talking about putting a fence in since they moved in last year. And I thought, boy, if they would put a fence in, then we could put a fence across the back of the property. And then I could put fences from the side to the sides of the house, near the back of the house, and then we'd have a private backyard. Well, what would I do with a private backyard? I would go out there and be protected from people seeing everything we're doing back there, and from animals running through the yard, and maybe from someone coming out there and doing something bad to me. Some people build fences for looks. Some build them to keep out what does not belong in. Some people build them to keep in what does not belong out. And some people build them for protection. I'm thinking about God's fence around us, God's hedge of protection. When I think about that, I think about Job. What happened to Job was allowed by God. The Bible tells us that God removed that hedge of protection around Job for a while. But then He put it back. I think of that hedge of protection that keeps us from fear, that keeps us with confidence with God. And then I go ahead and I look at the rest of this chapter, and it goes on down there in verse 19. It says, we love because He first loved us. Love wouldn't be possible if He didn't love us first. If anyone says, I love God, yet hates his brother, he's a liar. For anyone who does not love his brother whom he has seen and cannot love God for anyone who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. And this is a new command. Whoever loves God must also love his brother. The reason we love, God loves us. That verse 20 is very important. If we love God, we're going to love others. In verse 21, it's a commandment to live. Live by love. Well, I've been thinking of the power of love. What does the power of love do for us? It protects us from the power of evil spiritually. Just because I live in the world doesn't mean I'm not going to have natural fears. It doesn't mean that bad things aren't going to happen to me, but it means that spiritually I'm protected. Second thing I see is that God's love gives me wisdom in my inner being. He guides me every day. He keeps me from doing dumb things that are going to cause me problems if I would just listen to Him. He tells me where to go and what to do, and sometimes He holds me up from going somewhere to protect me. He gives me wisdom in my inner being. And then God's love, the power of love, binds us together with God and with each other. I don't know about you, but I need that love today in my life. I need that bond of love. I need God's amazing grace in my life. And it's just amazing the way God works in our lives. Listen to this song. Join us singing it if you want to.